Human arrives on alien world. 2 girls demand to breed with him. Riley Hall's spacecraft trembled violently as it entered the alien atmosphere. Flames engulfed the cockpit windows as the heat shield struggled to protect the fragile metal beneath. With every passing second, the once sleek exploration vessel crumbled, and Riley gripped the control stick with white-knuckled determination. The world outside was a blur of greens and blues, strange shapes darting in the periphery of his vision. He had no time to admire the alien planet. All his attention was focused on surviving the catastrophic descent. The ship slammed into the surface with a bone-rattling thud, sending debris flying in every direction. Riley's head whipped back, and he momentarily blacked out. When his eyes fluttered open, pain radiated through his body, but he was alive. He groaned, releasing the control stick as he felt a deep cut on his forehead. Blood trickled down, blurring his vision. His hand fumbled for his first aid kit, hastily patching himself up as best he could. Outside, the once sturdy hull of his ship was twisted beyond recognition, the alien jungle creeping closer to envelop it. Massive trees with bioluminescent bark and twisting vines glowed faintly in the dim light. The planet felt alive, pulsing with energy and mystery. Riley stumbled from the wreckage, his heart pounding with both fear and awe. But before he could truly take in the alien beauty, a sharp, sudden noise cut through the air. "Who's there?" Riley shouted, trying to steady his breath. Emerging from the shadows, 2 alien figures approached with sleek energy weapons in hand. They were tall, their skin shimmering in various shades of deep blue and violet, with luminous eyes that glowed with intensity. The larger of the 2 pointed her weapon at Riley, her voice rough but understandable. "You are human?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Yes," Riley responded cautiously, raising his hands in a universal gesture of surrender. "Who are you?" The aliens exchanged glances before the smaller one stepped forward. "I am Zera, and this is Elira," she said, motioning to her companion. "You are now our guest." "Guest?" Riley muttered. He didn't like the sound of that. But before he could protest, Zera gestured sharply with her weapon. "You will come with us. You have much to learn." Riley was led through the dense jungle by the 2 alien women, their footsteps graceful and silent against the soft forest floor. As they guided him deeper into the heart of the planet, Riley took in the sights around him. Strange, glowing flora illuminated their path, casting eerie shadows across the trees. Creatures with multiple limbs scurried through the underbrush, their bioluminescent bodies flickering like fireflies in the darkness. It was beautiful but unnerving. Finally, they arrived at a large settlement, hidden deep within the jungle. The structures were made from living wood, twisting and growing naturally into complex shapes and patterns. The architecture seemed to blend seamlessly with nature. Riley had never seen anything like it before. It was both awe-inspiring and humbling. They brought him to a grand hall, its ceiling arched high above them, formed from massive intertwined tree branches. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Dozens of the blue-skinned aliens stood in a semicircle, all eyes locked on Riley. An elder stepped forward, her face lined with age, but her eyes sharp with wisdom. "We are the Drawl," she began, her voice carrying an air of authority. "Our species is dying. A plague has ravaged our people, leaving only a handful of us able to reproduce. You, human, may be our last hope." Riley's heart sank. This was more than he had bargained for. He had come to explore the galaxy, not to become the salvation of an alien race. The elder continued, her gaze unyielding. "You will mate with Zera and Elira. It is the only way." "Wait, hold on," Riley stammered, backing away. "I'm not." But before he could finish, Zera and Elira stepped forward, their expressions filled with determination. "It is our duty," Zera said softly, though there was an underlying force in her voice. "You will help us, or we will all die." Riley's mind raced as he sat in the small chamber the Drawl had provided for him. The implications of what the elder had said weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had no desire to become the father of an entire species, but he couldn't ignore their desperation. He had seen the sorrow in their eyes, the fear that their race would soon be extinct. But this wasn't his responsibility, was it? As he pondered his fate, Zara entered the room, her expression softer than it had been before. She sat beside him, her glowing eyes watching him carefully. "I know this is difficult for you," she said gently. "But understand, we have no other choice. You are the only one who can help us." Riley sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't exactly what I signed up for when I came out here. I wanted to explore, to discover new worlds, not to become some kind of savior." Zara finished for him, her eyes flickering with a hint of sadness. "We do not wish to force this upon you, but we are desperate. We have tried everything else. We are running out of time." Riley looked at her, seeing the pain etched into her features. He realized then that this wasn't just about survival for them. It was about hope. The hope that their species could continue, that they could build a future for themselves and their children. How could he deny them that? "I'll think about it," Riley finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "That is all we ask." As she left him alone with his thoughts, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he would never have imagined. He had come to explore the stars, but now he found himself at the heart of an alien race's survival. The weight of their future pressed down on him, and he knew that whatever decision he made, it would change the course of his life forever. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty for Riley. He wandered through the Drawl settlement, trying to make sense of his new reality. The Drawl people treated him with a mix of reverence and curiosity, often watching him from afar, whispering among themselves as he passed by. He felt like an outsider, a stranger in a world that both fascinated and unnerved him. Zara and Elira, the two Drawl females chosen to mate with him, were never far from his side. They accompanied him through the winding paths of the settlement, introducing him to their customs and culture. Despite their earlier bluntness, they showed him a softer side, one filled with pride in their heritage and a deep desire to ensure their people's survival. But the tension between the two of them was palpable, and Riley could sense the undercurrent of rivalry simmering just beneath the surface. As they walked through the settlement one afternoon, Elira broke the silence. "Have you made your decision, human?" she asked, her voice sharp with impatience, her glowing eyes fixed on him with a predatory intensity. Riley hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I'm still thinking about it," he replied carefully. "This is a big decision. I need time." Elira frowned, her expression hardening. "Time is something we do not have," she said coldly. "Every moment you delay brings us closer to extinction. Do you not understand the gravity of this situation?" Before Riley could answer, Zara stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Elira, we must give him space to make his choice. Pressuring him will not help." Elira scowled, clearly frustrated. "We do not have the luxury of time, Zara. We cannot afford to wait while he—" "Enough," Zara snapped, her normally gentle demeanor giving way to a rare display of authority. "He is not a tool to be used at our convenience. We must respect his autonomy." The two women locked eyes, the air between them thick with tension. Riley watched the exchange, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. He had never asked for this responsibility, yet here he was, caught in the middle of a conflict that seemed to be growing more complicated by the day. Later that evening, as Riley sat alone in his chamber, Zara visited him once more. She approached cautiously, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants that decorated the room. "I apologize for Elira's behavior," Zara said quietly, sitting beside him. "She is passionate, but her heart is in the right place." Riley sighed, rubbing his temples. "I understand the situation is dire, but this is all so overwhelming. I never thought I'd be in a position like this." Zara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch cool but comforting. I know this is not easy for you, but please know that whatever decision you make, we will respect it. We do not wish to force you into anything you do not wish to do." Riley looked into her eyes and saw the sincerity there. Despite everything, he had come to admire Zira's strength and compassion. She had taken the time to understand his reservations and had shown him a kindness he hadn't expected. In that moment, Riley realized that his connection to her was growing stronger. "I appreciate that, Zira," Riley said softly. "I just need more time to figure this out." She nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "Take the time you need. We will be here, waiting." As she left the room, Riley felt a growing sense of conflict within himself. The pressure of the Drall's expectations weighed heavily on him, but so did his own sense of duty. He couldn't deny that he felt a responsibility to help them, but at the same time, he wasn't sure he could go through with what they were asking of him. The night was quiet as Riley lay in his bed, his thoughts racing. The future of an entire species rested on his shoulders, and he had no idea how to proceed. But one thing was certain: whatever choice he made would shape not only his own destiny, but the destiny of the Drall as well. The following morning, Riley woke with a sense of resolve. He hadn't made any final decisions yet, but he knew he needed to understand more about the Drall people and their way of life before committing to anything. If he was to be part of their future, even temporarily, he needed to see things from their perspective. Zira and Illyra greeted him with cautious smiles when he emerged from his chamber. The previous day's tension had not entirely dissipated, but they seemed willing to give him space. As they guided him through the settlement, Riley decided to use this opportunity to ask more questions. "Tell me more about your people," Riley said as they walked. "Not just about the situation with the plague, but your history, your culture. I need to understand more before I can make any decisions." Zira exchanged a look with Illyra before nodding. "Of course," she said. "Our people are ancient. We have lived on this planet for thousands of cycles, evolving alongside the flora and fauna that surround us. The Drall are deeply connected to the natural world. Our biology is intertwined with the life force of this planet." She gestured to the glowing trees and plants around them. "These plants are not just for decoration. They are part of us. We draw energy from them, and they help to sustain us. In return, we nurture and protect them. This symbiosis has been the foundation of our existence for as long as our histories have been recorded." Illyra picked up the thread of conversation. "Our society is matriarchal," she explained. "Our leaders have always been women, as we believe they carry the wisdom of creation within them. Our traditions have been passed down through the generations, with each leader guiding us in accordance with the will of the planet." Riley listened intently, intrigued by their culture. It was clear that the Drall were a deeply spiritual people, connected to their world in ways that went beyond what he had initially understood. They lived in harmony with their environment, and their rituals and customs were rooted in this balance. As they continued their walk, Zira led Riley to a large open area at the heart of the settlement. In the center of the space stood an enormous tree with shimmering silver leaves. Its roots spread out like a network of veins, and its branches reached high into the sky, casting a soft, ethereal light over the area. "This is the heart tree," Zira said reverently. "It is the oldest and most sacred of all the trees on our planet. Our ancestors believed that it was the source of all life on Dralia, and we continue to honor it today." Riley stepped closer to the tree, feeling a strange sense of awe. The energy emanating from it was palpable, almost like a low hum that resonated in his bones. He placed a hand on the bark, feeling the warmth beneath his palm. "This tree, it's incredible," Riley said softly. "It feels alive in a way I've never experienced before." Zira smiled. "It is alive, Riley. The heart tree connects us all, to each other and to the planet. When our people are in pain, the tree feels it. When we thrive, the tree flourishes. It is the embodiment of our connection to this world." For the first time, Riley began to truly grasp the depth of the Drall's desperation. Their connection to their planet wasn't just spiritual, it was physical. The plague that had ravaged their population wasn't just threatening their species, it was threatening the very fabric of their existence. If they failed to survive, the delicate balance they had maintained for millennia could be destroyed. Riley stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of what he had learned. He was beginning to understand why the Drawl had been so insistent about the need to repopulate. This wasn't just about preserving their people, it was about preserving their entire way of life. Zera's voice broke the silence. "I know this is difficult for you," she said quietly, "but you are not alone in this. We are asking for your help because we believe you are the key to our survival. But we will not force you to do anything against your will." Elira, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "I may have been harsh," she admitted, her voice softer than usual. "But I am also desperate. Our people are dying, and I cannot bear the thought of losing everything we have worked for." Riley turned to face both women, feeling the weight of their words. He still wasn't sure what the right course of action was, but he was beginning to see the situation in a new light. This wasn't just about mating. It was about survival, about preserving a culture that had thrived for thousands of years. "I need more time," Riley said finally. "But I promise you, I'm not going to abandon you. I'll do what I can to help, but I need to figure out how." Zera and Elira both nodded, their expressions a mix of hope and relief. It wasn't a decision, but it was a step forward. And for now, that was enough. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the settlement, Riley stood before the heart tree, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let the Drawl people face it alone. As the days passed, Riley found himself more and more integrated into the daily life of the Drawl. He had spent hours listening to Zera and Elira, learning about their traditions, their values, and their desperate need for survival. Slowly, he began to feel a deeper connection to them, not just as individuals, but as part of a fragile ecosystem that hinged on every decision he made. One evening, after a long day of helping the Drawl repair parts of their settlement damaged by recent storms, Riley sat by a glowing pond, reflecting on everything that had happened since his arrival. Zera approached quietly, her footsteps barely making a sound on the soft ground. "May I sit with you?" she asked gently, her glowing blue eyes soft in the dim light. "Of course," Riley replied, gesturing for her to join him. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the gentle ripples in the pond as the bioluminescent plants pulsed with light beneath the surface. Zera turned to him, her voice soft but filled with purpose. "We need to talk about what comes next, Riley," she began. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, and I know that our situation is complicated, but the time is drawing near for a decision to be made." Riley sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "I've been thinking about it a lot. I understand what's at stake here. I do. But I'm still not sure if I'm the right person for this." Zera reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was cool but comforting. "You are not just a person to us, Riley. You are hope. Your presence here means that there is a chance for us to continue to survive. But we don't want to force you into something you're not ready for." Riley appreciated her sincerity, but he could still feel the weight of her words. The future of an entire race hung in the balance, and while he had made progress in understanding their culture, he still wasn't sure if he could fully commit to what they were asking of him. I don't want to make the wrong decision," Riley admitted. "If I agree to this, there's no turning back. And if I don't, what happens then?" Zera's eyes softened. "Then we face extinction, or we search for another way. But know this, whatever choice you make, we will honor it. We do not wish to coerce you into something that is not in your heart." As they sat there, Elira approached. Her usual stern demeanor was softened by the quietness of the evening. She stood a few feet away, watching them for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking too," Elira said, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "I've realized that I may have been too focused on our need for survival and not enough on what it means for you, Riley. This situation isn't fair to you. You never asked to be in this position." Riley looked at her in surprise. It was the first time Elira had shown any vulnerability since they had met. "Thank you," Riley said quietly. "I appreciate that." Elira sighed, sitting down beside them. "I've been so focused on the survival of our people that I forgot what it means to be compassionate. You've been thrown into our world without warning, and we've expected too much of you. I see that now." The air between them felt lighter, the tension that had hung over them for so long easing slightly. Riley felt a sense of relief, but also a growing determination. He wasn't ready to give up on them, even if he wasn't sure how to move forward. "I've been thinking," Riley said, his voice more certain now. "Maybe there's another way to help your people, something that doesn't involve, well, mating with me. You've mentioned that your society is deeply connected to the planet, to the environment. What if there's a way to reverse the effects of the plague, or at least slow it down?" Zira and Elira exchanged a glance. "We've tried many methods," Zira said slowly, "but our resources are limited. Our understanding of the plague is still incomplete." Riley leaned forward, feeling a spark of hope. "Maybe that's where I can help. I have knowledge of technology and science that you might not have access to. What if we work together to find a cure or at least a treatment for the plague?" Elira frowned. "It's not that simple. The plague has been with us for generations. We've tried everything we know." "But have you tried everything a human might know?" Riley pressed. "I'm not a scientist, but I have some basic knowledge of medicine and biology. If I could study your records, maybe I could offer a fresh perspective." Zira's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, Riley saw a flicker of hope there. "You would be willing to do that? To help us in that way?" "Yes," Riley said firmly. "I can't promise anything, but if there's even a chance that I can help, I want to try." Elira looked thoughtful. "It would be a long shot, but perhaps it's worth pursuing. If you're willing to help us in this way, we could combine our knowledge. Perhaps we've missed something that you might see." The conversation continued long into the night as they discussed the possibilities. Riley felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't ready to give up on the draw, but he needed to find a solution that worked for everyone, a way to honor their need for survival without compromising his own values. As the stars glittered overhead, Riley knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since his arrival, he felt like he had a real chance to make a difference, on his terms. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity and discovery. Riley immersed himself in studying the Drawl's extensive records on the plague, which were meticulously kept but, as he suspected, somewhat fragmented and filled with gaps. The Drawl had a wealth of biological and ecological knowledge, but they lacked the comprehensive understanding of the disease that might be gained from a more systematic, scientific approach. Zira and Elira facilitated his access to their archives, which were housed in a vast, domed structure at the edge of the settlement. The building's walls were lined with bioluminescent scrolls and data tablets, their contents glowing softly in the dim light. Riley spent hours poring over these materials, attempting to piece together a coherent picture of the plague's progression and impact. Meanwhile, Zira and Elira worked alongside him, their initially skeptical attitudes softening as they observed Riley's dedication and growing expertise. Riley's approach was methodical, and he began to identify patterns and anomalies that had previously gone unnoticed. He wasn't just studying the data, he was also engaging in discussions with Drawl biologists and herbalists, learning about their traditional remedies and how they interacted with the disease. One evening, Riley and Zira sat together in the research chamber, surrounded by glowing scrolls and data tablets. Riley had just made a significant breakthrough. "Zira, look at this," Riley said, pointing to a holographic display of the plague's progression. "There's a correlation between the environmental changes and the increase in disease severity. It seems like the plague might be triggered or exacerbated by specific ecological factors. Zira's eyes widened as she examined the data. We've always suspected that the plague was linked to environmental changes, but we didn't have enough data to confirm it. This could be a major breakthrough. Elira, who had joined them, nodded thoughtfully. If the plague is linked to these factors, then finding a way to stabilize our environment might help in controlling or even curing the disease. Riley nodded. Exactly. But we need more information to be certain. I'd like to conduct some field studies, collect more samples, and analyze the environmental conditions in different parts of the settlement. Zira and Elira agreed, and over the next few weeks, Riley led a series of expeditions into various regions of the Drall's territory. They collected samples from the soil, water, and air, and Riley took detailed notes on the environmental conditions. Each expedition revealed more about the intricate relationship between the plague and the Drall's ecosystem. During this time, Riley also continued to work closely with Zira and Elira, teaching them some of the scientific techniques he was using. They learned how to operate complex instruments and perform analyses, and their initial skepticism turned into genuine collaboration. The Drall were adapting to Riley's methods, blending their traditional knowledge with his scientific approach. As their work progressed, Riley began to formulate a hypothesis. The plague appeared to be a result of a combination of environmental stressors and a pathogen that had mutated over time. Stabilizing the environment and introducing specific treatments could potentially mitigate the effects of the disease. One day, as they gathered to discuss their findings, Riley presented his plan. Based on what we've discovered, I propose a multifaceted approach. First, we need to stabilize the environmental factors that are contributing to the plague. This involves managing the energy flow from the heart tree and other critical ecosystems. Second, we should develop a treatment that targets the pathogen more effectively. Zira and Elira listened attentively. How do we go about stabilizing the environment? Zira asked. Riley explained. We need to monitor and regulate the energy levels and environmental conditions closely. We can use sensors and environmental controls to maintain stability. As for the treatment, we'll need to develop a compound that can target the pathogen without disrupting the Drall's ecosystem. The plan was ambitious, but the Drall were willing to try. They worked together to implement the environmental controls and develop the treatment. The process was slow and required constant adjustments, but Riley felt optimistic. During this time, Riley also began to see a change in his relationship with Zira and Elira. They had grown from adversaries into collaborators, and Riley felt a deep sense of camaraderie with them. They shared their hopes and fears, and Riley's initial reluctance to get involved had evolved into a genuine commitment to helping the Drall. One evening, as they took a break from their work, Zira and Elira joined Riley by the heart tree. The atmosphere was calm, and the tree's soft light created a peaceful ambience. Riley, Zira said, her voice filled with gratitude. I want to thank you for everything you've done. You've given us hope when we had none. Elira nodded. We're starting to see improvements. The environmental controls are stabilizing, and the treatment is showing promise. Riley smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. I'm glad to be able to help. This has been a journey, and I'm grateful for the chance to be part of it. As they stood together, looking up at the heart tree, Riley felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Drall were still facing challenges, but they were no longer fighting alone. Riley had found a way to contribute to their survival, and, in doing so, had discovered a deeper connection to the world he had once seen as alien. The future remained uncertain, but for now, Riley knew that he had made a difference. He had helped the Drall take a step toward healing and survival, and that was a victory in itself.